Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me today to learn more about the Missouri Department of Mental Health Division of Developmental Disabilities Utilization Review Process. My name is Wanda Crocker, and I am currently one of 3 Assistant Deputy Directors serving the Division of Developmental Disabilities, as well as supporting the utilization review process. The original training of this content was provided via web event on May 15, 2024, and included 5 major components. An overview of the utilization review memo that was effective May 1st, 2024. An overview of the utilization review process. A review of the critical criteria that meets the priority of need 5. Resources that should be explored prior to the Medicaid waiver, and a handful of clarifications and reminders about service components that have surfaced in the last few months. As the May 15th web event experienced systems outage, which broke up the web event and the recording had to be recreated, stakeholders expressed that it would be helpful to have the content divided into smaller content opportunities. This supports people listening and reviewing the content that best meets their needs initially and as refreshers are needed. This particular session, Utilization Review Part 2, covers a review of purpose and overview of utilization review. So let's get started. The Division of Developmental Disabilities does have a CSR titled Utilization Review Process that you can go to for full content. Here, we're going to abbreviate and give you an overview of that content. Utilization review is a formal process at the regional office to review priority of need, or PON, proposed individualized support plans, or ISPs, and budgets, and make recommendations for approval, modification, or denial of the requested services. The regional director or assistant director has the authority to review and approve recommended services and may designate individuals to review and approve recommended services. The authority to deny or modify requested services lies solely with the regional director or assistant regional director. The utilization review process was created to ensure that individuals eligible for division services with similar needs are treated consistently and fairly throughout the state. Ensure each individual's annual plan accurately reflects their individual needs. Ensure that the levels of services defined and documented within the outcomes of each individual's plans. Prioritize the need for service. That they ensure accountability of public funds. In essence, it's a check, confirmation that services meet Missouri values, are justified in the plan, and an external audit would not find fault with the expenditures of tax funds for the services. So what goes to utilization review? All initial plans requesting Medicaid waiver or general revenue dollars have to go to utilization review. Any amended plans that raise the dollar amounts of the plan. That could be an individual asking for additional units than were previously authorized, or a rate increase to products. Not rate increases to services, because those are approved at a division level. Any plan that adds a new service once a person is already in the waiver. And plans at the discretion of the regional director. And those are typically residential services or components of those residential services that are time limited. So asking for one-on-one service in an individualized supported living setting, the loss of a housemate, therefore increasing the individual's budget or service request. Those are typical requests that the regional director asks to come back, even if there is no change, so that those requests can be monitored. So as a support coordinator, when you are developing your utilization review packet, it's really helpful to just kind of go back to some of the basics of what we were taught about how to write a story in grade school: the who, what, where, when, how, why, and how much. If you answer those questions fully and completely, if you truly paint the picture of what is happening and why this service is necessary, you are likely to meet all of the required components and have very few questions asked of you. So let's just walk through some of what those are. Who, what, where, when, why, how much. Who's the service for, and who will provide the service? And when you ask yourself, when you describe who the service is for, I just don't just mean the person's name. Often that's what the packet says. But when you read what is described, it becomes obvious that the service isn't actually about the person, but about their caregiver, perhaps, often denoted by the number of hours being asked for. So keep the focus on the person and why the person needs the hours or the service. So the what is a big what. It's a lot of sub questions under what, but what service is being requested? What is the service going to accomplish or do that meets the definition of the service? You have to connect the ask to the definition. What other services have been attempted in the results of those services? And this is commonly reflected when someone is asking for a 24-hour residential service. What in-home services were first explored? What natural supports? What other funding sources? And why or why not did those work? What were the benefits? What were the negatives? Why are you now asking for residential services? So often we see requests for residential services when there was no other services attempted first. Many of our people are very capable and want to live independently, but instead of asking for individualized services in the community so that they can have an apartment of their own or whatever that looks like, so that they can be a part of their community to the best of their ability, the ask is for 24-hour residential support. So what has been tried to keep the person in the community, in their place of their own residence, in their family homes, somewhere prior to 24-hour supports? What is occurring that led to this request? What's going to happen if the service isn't delivered, right? Connect the dots, connect that story to without X, Y will happen. And not just will as in we're predicting it will happen, but because of the hospitalizations and because of the skin breakdowns currently experienced and the frequency of physicians' consultations, this service has been determined to mitigate that and keep them healthier, connect things. Oftentimes we just ask for something and we don't explain what will happen without the service. We talk about it in generic terms, but connect the dots and be very specific. What state plans and community supports have been accessed, and we're going to talk about more of that in our utilization review part 3. What situation exists to meet the critical criteria for a prioritization need of 5? And I'm sorry, state plan natural supports is in part 4 because the critical criteria is part 3. But describe what the specific situation is in detail that leads you to believe that this person meets the highest priority level, that they, before anyone else asking for this service, should be given priority. You have to remember that we serve over 16,000 people just in our Medicaid waiver alone, and more people who are not in the waiver. So treat every request as if you have to convince someone that this person needs services more than the other 16,000 waiver recipients that we serve. If you come at it from that mindset, I need to justify, I need to explain why this person's needs are greater than anyone else's, likely you're going to build that story and it's going to show up when utilization review reviews your content. So where will the service be performed? When, if time of day is relevant? Why is the service needed? And that kind of ties with the what as well. What happens without the service? Why should the service exist? And remember, it's not a prediction of what will happen, but what will happen? Why is that going to happen? How is this service different from what state plan provides? Or how is it different that it can supplement state plan? How, without this service, is the person at reasonable risk to be admitted to an ICFID or residential care service? That's a criteria at risk to be admitted to ICFID. That is a critical criteria of eligibility for waiver. Paint that picture. Explain how that is true. And then, of course, how much service is needed, how much service is justified. Your justification has to support the hours of service you're asking for. If the justification doesn't match, if you're asking for 80 hours a week of queue and prompt, that's not justified. That's an exorbitant amount of service for queue and prompt. Chances are, if someone needs someone to stand over them 80 hours a week, they need more than just queuing and prompting. They need personal assistance. So describe and justify, connect again the dots, how much with your justification. Paint that picture. So just to give a review and helping people understand the different roles that each person in the process plays, because utilization review is a process. Oftentimes people think of utilization review as a person, when in fact the utilization review process starts with the support coordinator and then it moves through multiple hands. And so it's a multi-approval, multi-stage process. It starts with the support coordinator, who before asking for waiver services is responsible to connect that individual to all other funding sources. They're responsible to verify the eligibility for Medicaid waiver when appropriate. They're responsible to obtain the priority of need, or PON, when appropriate. Responsible to develop that individualized support plan, put together a utilization review packet, including justification for request, and working through that with the planning team, with the person and their family, and their other caregivers, people that are important to them, documenting their ask, their need, that story. And then, of course, submitting that packet to the supervisor. So then it goes to their supervisor, and the support coordinator supervisor should be reviewing that utilization review packet to ensure the content is accurate, complete, and in order to minimize the incomplete packets returned at the next stage of utilization review by the UR lead. So that support coordination supervisor should be that quality assurance level. They're really responsible to making sure and backing up the support coordinator that they've done what they needed to do. And then they submit to the next step of the process, which is the UR lead. So if you look at the UR lead, they're going to review the packet back to that who, what, where, when, how, why, and how much. They're looking for all of the content requirements, not just the documentation, the story, but also the forms that are necessary. The UR lead is going to make a recommendation to the regional director or their designee anytime there's a request for an initial Medicaid waiver slot or request a change between waivers. They are going to make a recommendation to the regional director designee when there is a request to exceed $5,000 or the plan or service exceeds the service or waiver cap. And they refer to the regional director when recommending a service denial or modification. Some of the other things that the UR lead does are listed here below. Some of our UR leads do not have clerical support and some do. In the last 12 consecutive months, the 17 UR leads in the state have processed more than 26,000 utilization review requests. In addition to that, they are processing waiver slot assignments and termination. They're tracking all their utilization review information. They're processing or sending out the utilization review letters. They manually add and remove people from the wait list. As typically, although right now we don't have a wait list to qualify, people do have to show up on the list and then be given a slot and removed from the list. It's just how one of the ways that we track how many people were assigned a slot, not that there is currently a wait list, just to clarify. And then, of course, all of the technical assistance that they provide to the TCM entities. So then it goes to the next level. If it qualifies for those recommendations by UR lead, if they don't have the ability to approve it themselves, it goes to the regional director or designee who approves all initial waiver slot requests, They're the decision maker on all denials and partial approvals. They're the decision maker on all approvals greater than $5,000. They review all requests to exceed the service or waiver cap, and they facilitate the UR appeals. Likewise, like the UR leads and everyone in this process, they have multiple responsibilities. In addition to the utilization review functions, they're also the facilitator for the appeals process for intake, for abuse and neglect, for provider corrective action plans, mortality review, as well as supervising and facility management. So every person in this process has a wide variety of responsibilities. And the better that that first layer of the utilization review at the support coordinator level can define and put together that UR packet, the easier it is for every person above them to be able to track, follow, and keep in alignment and make a decision. So it's really vital that every person at every step does a quality and complete job. So just wanted to illustrate for everyone that everyone in this process is wearing other hats as well. And so we all need to work together to make a seamless process happen so that the people we serve can get their services delivered efficiently and as quickly as possible. So that is the end of our utilization review part 2. I hope you will join me in reviewing the utilization review part 3, which reviews the critical criteria necessary to obtain a prioritization of need 5.